Good morning. I'm Brian Hughes, NJCAR Director of Communications, and I want to thank you for joining this morning's NJCAR webinar, Managing Your Dealership's Cyber Risk During the Pandemic and Beyond. Today you'll hear from retired FBI Special Agent John Iannarelli and Dr. Suzanne Miller, a principal at Citrin Cooperman. Judy Van of JV Solutions, as well as Charles Russo, NJCAR's risk manager and safety specialist, are also on the call. The COVID-19 crisis has opened a whole new series of potential cyber attacks for auto dealerships, on top of the long-standing risks the industry has long been facing. During this webinar, Special Agent Iannarelli and Dr. Miller will discuss how the new norm in the business world is bringing new cyber risks and threats as dealerships shift to remote working environments in some capacity. You'll learn about the new tactics cyber criminals are using to actively target workers and what you can do to reduce the risk of a cyber attack. Before we begin, I just have a few very quick housekeeping details. On the right-hand side of your screen is your control panel. I'd like to point out the questions tab in particular. During the call, all participants will be muted. If you have a question during the presentation, we ask that you write it down. We'll give you a 5-minute heads up when the webinar is winding down, and then you can submit your question in the question tab if it hasn't already been answered. Now I'd like to turn things over to Judy Van, who will formally introduce today's speakers. Judy?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending. We're very excited to bring this program to you. Many of you know me as the Director of Training for the NJCAR Academy. I have worked with many dealerships in New Jersey to implement their dealer safeguards and red flags policies. This certainly takes us to another level of data security and data privacy, which is not my expertise. So I'm very excited to have John Iannarelli and Suzanne Miller here today to give us their expertise on this very, very important subject. I want to thank Citrin Cooperman. Ellen Kara is a partner at Citrin Cooperman. She's on the line as well. She is the co-leader of the firm's automotive dealer practice with over 20 years of experience in public accounting. Her main focus is in the automotive industry, where she delivers value by pairing her expertise with specialized services, including consulting on complex tax matters and helping clients implement best practices. We also have on the line from NJCAR, Charles Russo. He is NJCAR's Director of Risk Management and Insurance Services. Many of you may know Charles from coming into your dealerships. He provides professional risk management advice and helps our members implement NJCAR's Zero Injury Protection Program, known as ZIP. So, Charles, did you want to say a couple words right now?
Yeah, just real quickly, we want to continue to bring the risk management topics that are relevant to our members. I'm continually scanning the environment to find the things that are important, not only with the COVID-19 pandemic, but that are important overall for businesses and how they manage their risk. So, we started seeing that there was some activity in New Jersey around cyber fraud and theft. And we thought it was a good idea to do something like this for our members. So we just want to continue to do that. If there's any ideas that the members have that they'd like to see us, a topic, a risk management topic that they'd like us to do, please reach out to me and let us know, what other topics would be useful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts as well, and just thank everybody for being here today. And I hope everybody finds it very useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Charles. So very excited. I've had the pleasure of speaking with John Iannarelli, and Suzanne Miller has presented for us in the past. So John Iannarelli is going to start off our great program this morning with the voice of cyber and security. And John Iannarelli is retired from the FBI for more than 20 years of service, during which time he was a member of the FBI SWAT team and participated in the investigations of the Oklahoma City bombing, the 9/11 attack, the shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, and many, many more. So he's a very exciting presenter for us to have on this webinar today. He previously served in Washington, D.C. as the FBI National Spokesperson and later on the executive staff of the FBI Cyber Division. He was a squad supervisor before becoming the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Phoenix division. So with that, I'm going to let John take over at this point. And John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Judy, thanks for having me, and thank you, everyone. I appreciate you inviting me out to talk to you today a little bit about cybersecurity, how to keep your dealerships, your people, your employees, and most importantly, your customers safe so that everybody's happy and we can get through this COVID and all the things that are going to be out there after COVID, because the cyber problems that have arisen during this time, they're not going away. They're here to stay, much like the way you're doing business today, in that you're going to still use technologies that have become very common during COVID, but are going to be common after we get back to the new normal. So starting off with just some of the basics. You go out, you get a computer for your office, even a computer for your home. You take it out of the box, you plug it in. Think about it for just a second. How long before somebody hacks into your computer? And I've done this presentation in front of 1,000 audiences. I hear a day, an hour, a minute, etc. Well, when you look at all the different computers that are hacked, on average, it's about 5 minutes before somebody starts pinging that computer trying to get into it. So you have to be aware of what's on the computer and how you're protecting your system. Do you have the proper software in place so that way you can ensure your computer is not going to be infected, meaning your office network's not infected, so that way nobody can get into your system, steal your data, your important information, your customers' payment information, etc. And today this has become more complicated because not only do we need to protect your office computers, we now need to protect every computer of every employee working from home. So how expensive is this going to be if you're breached? Well, I will let you know that last year was the worst year on record for data breaches. We had over 15 billion records compromised. That's 15 billion different customers, clients that had their data compromised. That was based on about 7,000 breaches nationwide. Now, those are the breaches that people take the time to report to the FBI. A lot of people don't want the publicity. They think it's bad PR to say they've been breached, although it's very commonplace now. So just the reports received. The average loss was about $8 million per breach, and that varies depending upon the size of the company. If you lose a record of one customer, it's going to cost you about $242 to make that person whole. Now, that doesn't seem like a terrible amount of money, but then you look at, say, the Capital One breach. You know, Capital One, they're, it's who's in your wallet? Well, that should be their motto these days. They lost 100 million records. So at $242 a record, and of course, who's paying for that? You and I. That's all getting passed along to the consumer. They haven't lost stride in their business. But what happens to you if, say, you lose 10,000 records and at $242 a piece? Can you survive that? Are you going to be able to continue business? I'm going to talk about some of the things like cyber insurance, etc. But even better, let's try to keep you safe so that you're not breached in the first place. Unfortunately, when we look at the automotive industry, cyber criminals have figured out that is the place to go. They look for places that deal with customer information and finance, and you guys are the best of both worlds. We've seen a 6 times increase in the past decade of what has been targeted by cyber criminals going after dealerships. It's an easy place to get into. Your business is not one of cybersecurity, so it's not the primary concern. And I just have to breach one single employee. I don't have to worry about the entire network security. If I can get at one of your employees, I can get into your system, I can get your information. And some of the dealerships have been hacked. We have the Federal Trade Commission. They keep records on all this. So far, they've counted 130 dealerships have been victimized by cyber breaches nationwide. 2.5 million customer records and customer financial information captured in those breaches. Remember, that's $242 per, plus that doesn't include all the actual money that's been lost. Essentially, these breaches happened because dealerships weren't taking time to properly encrypt or store sensitive information. It was very easy for the thieves to get it. And what they were able to do is they downloaded all the personal information, the social security numbers, your driver's license number, date of birth, and their financial info, all the things that cyber criminals are looking for. Two quick examples. We had a Tesla dealership, a disgruntled employee, somebody who decided they were going to profit on the side of the business. And we all have had disgruntled employees during our careers, but it doesn't even have to be a disgruntled employee. An inside employee job can be somebody who's just careless or did not do the right thing or wasn't trained properly. In this case, it was somebody actually angry with the dealership, and they wound up selling sensitive information to outsiders. It's the same thing as a breach. It cost the dealership quite a bit of money. Another Porsche dealership, they had 28,000 customer records stolen in a true cyber attack. The sad thing here is the dealership did everything right. They were following all the guidelines, but they had a subcontractor who was connected to their network. The subcontractor did not have protocols in place. Cyber criminals know, I don't have to attack you. I just have to get to somebody who does business with you and get in. You know, think back to the Target breach. In Target, everybody talks about Target. They remember the name Target. We don't shop at Target today without thinking about Target was the victim of a major breach, but it wasn't Target. It was an air conditioning service company that was doing repairs for Target that was breached. And that's how the cyber criminals got into Target. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business, but you know, if my suggestion is you don't want to be a victim, don't name your business Target. But nevertheless, they were a victim, and it cost them not just a lot of money, but brand reputation as well. So there's a lot of different cyber attacks, and on this screen here, I'm just sharing with you some examples of various things and ways criminals may breach you. I'm not going to talk about all these today because we don't have the time. When I come out in person, I go a little more in depth and give you suggestions how to protect against. But what I want to do is I want to pick out just a handful of these, run through the most common types of attacks you might see and how you can protect yourself. So the first one is phishing. You've probably heard the term phishing before, and this is a great example of a phishing scam. This was an email that was received by about 20,000 people, and it generates essentially, it's an arrest warrant. It says civil, but you can arrest somebody civilly as well as criminally, and it orders you to appear in court because of some various mistake you've made or something you've done in the course of business that's caused a problem. It looks very official. It says from the United States District Court, and it gave you an option that if you didn't want to deal with it, you can just pay the very low fine. You enter all your information. And for many, many people, it was worth the time and trouble not to go to court by paying the fine. So out of 20,000 recipients, 1,800 people actually responded. Think about that in the course of your business. What if 1 in 10 people that you sent out an advertisement to actually decided to buy a car? That's exactly the response we got here in phishing. And I will tell you, if you ever get anything like this, don't trust it. The reality is the government's never going to send you an email saying you're under arrest or you need to pay a fine. We will, based on experience, I will tell you, we will come out and pick you up. So ignore anything you receive via email, but not just from the government. Anything that indicates, hey, COVID, here's some important information you should know. IRS, your tax refund expedited because of COVID. Or would you like more free money from the government? Click here. All of that is suspect today. You have to be very careful because the cyber criminals are using COVID to try to get to you, to get your information and your customers' information. You've probably heard of ransomware. Well, Ransomware is probably the second most common type of cyber theft that's going on right now. In the terms of ransomware, just some basic things you want to be aware of. You have to make sure that you have your system backed up and your files saved. I can't tell you how many people have contacted me because they're a victim of ransomware, only to find out they've never backed up their files, or even worse, they have backed up their files, but they backed it up on the same server, which means they don't have any backup that hasn't been compromised. Make sure you have all your systems patched and updated, so that way, if there's some sort of problem with your software, whatever company is supplying it has fixed that problem and they're aware of it. Every time you get a patch request, that means they discovered a hole that can let cyber criminals in. You want to download the patch. And make sure you have a response plan. Make sure you know who you're going to contact and who you're going to put in charge of fixing anything that could possibly happen to you. If it does occur, get some expert help. You want to get a forensic person in there who knows computers, who can find it and fix the problem, because once you have ransomware, until you get rid of it, you've got it again. You can pay the ransom, but it doesn't mean they're not coming back. And I suggest you don't pay the ransom, because you're dealing with criminals. There's no honor amongst thieves, and who's to say they're going to give you your information back just because you paid the $10,000 or $15,000 ransom? Contact the FBI. We deal with this all the time, and we may be able to help you. Also, take your system offline. Isolate it. Don't let that ransomware spread to your home computer, your employee's computer, even your customer computer, since you're doing all this work these days online. You want to eliminate it and neutralize the problem by shutting down until your forensics person can fix the problem. Business email compromise, BEC. This is the most common scam we're seeing today. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically the FBI has reported various scams. So far, we had last year 22,000 businesses reported this type of scam. The loss was $12 billion, increased 270% from the year before. Criminals know this is working. And what it is a sophisticated scam using social media. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I'm the boss. And how do I do that? Well, I've gone to LinkedIn. I've looked up everything about the boss. They hack into your email. They watch email traffic. They figure out who handles the money transfers. So when customers are wiring in money, etc. And then they'll jump in the middle pretending to be the boss or the person who handles the financial transfer, and they'll send different wiring instructions, so that way the money will go somewhere else, and it usually goes overseas. Take a look at this. I'm going to use my email address as an example. That's my business email address. Now, if I was to hack in and use a different email address, what's different here? Well, what I did was I changed the FBI to FBL in the second email. Can you tell the difference between an I and an L in your email? Probably not. It's slightly smaller, but the human eye is not going to be able to pick it up. This may seem a little more obvious, FB1, but again, when looking at email, who would catch something like that and realize it's a fake email? I have hundreds of examples of clients that have been victimized in this way. So you can't rely on visual cues to see the email is correct. What you want to make sure is that you have policies in place. I'm going to send you wiring instructions. You're going to call me to confirm the instructions. Don't do anything by email alone. You have to make sure that you're communicating with your clients, your customers, to keep their money safe, because if you've been hacked and they lose their money, you're the one that's responsible. Everybody's working remotely now. And in the work remote world, we have a variety of different ways we can work remote. You know, we're going through GoToWebinar today for this presentation, but Zoom and all these others and hundreds more. There's a lot of different tools to work remote in these days of COVID, but any one of these tools can be compromised. You've probably heard the term Zoom bombing, and it's a generic term that applies to any type of work remote software. What you want to do is prevent this webinar, your Zoom call, or anything else from being compromised by the bad guys. Make sure when you get on a Zoom call, you set one up, or a webinar, you have a password. There's a strong password given out as opposed to making it an open call. I've seen people advertise on social media, hey, Zoom call tomorrow, this is the dial-in. Well, you're putting it out for the world, and who's to say somebody's not going to come in and be disruptive? I've had people project Nazi signs during the middle of business calls, pornography, curse words. Think about the branding for your business. How's your customer going to feel if suddenly you have swastikas popping up on the screen during any sort of meeting with a client? You want to make sure you're being secure, that you've set a password that will keep you safe. If you're doing stuff from home, make sure you have a generic name for your Wi-Fi. Don't name your Wi-Fi whatever your last name is or the name of your dealership, especially in the workplace. It makes it easier for the cyber criminal to target you, knows exactly where to look. You have to have the router configuration set properly. That's pretty standard when they come in to set up your internet access. Avoid the hotspots, and especially when you're doing business, because criminals will target hotspots specifically to get at you. Only use approved tools. Anything you get from Zoom, you'll see, or anywhere else, you'll often get emails for extensions. Ignore all that stuff. Most of it is third-party applications. A lot of it has been tampered with to get to you. And make sure you have all the security settings on. People turn them off because it makes it more convenient to do work quicker, but it's not doing work safer. With all this said, let me run you through an actual FBI case so you can see kind of the things that happen out there. In this case, we had a victim, obviously, just like all dealerships, held a lot of PII, personally identifiable information. They were getting about 12,000 customer leads a month and spending six figures on marketing. But for the business, they were bringing in about $1 million in monthly revenue after their expenses. So certainly a wise investment for them. In mid-sized business, they had 100 employees at this particular location. They noticed someone was going into their website, their network, with a suspicious IP address, not anything related to the company. An IP address is a number that's assigned to a computer, and only known IP addresses should be able to access the network. It turns out the IP address belonged to one of their competitors, and the competitor was owned by a former employee of the victim company. The subject, which is what we call them in the FBI, he had been the vice president of operations for the victim company. He submitted his letter of resignation, and then he opened his competing business. All good there. Subject number two, second guy involved, he also had worked for the victim at one time. He gave us 2 weeks notice, but during that 2-week period, he still had his user ID and he can log on to the network. Well, he did it from the subject's computer and using their IP address because he was already working for the subject. And I'm going to show you, this is what a server log looks like. I don't expect you to be able to read it, but I'll just point out the subject number two went into the server log using his credentials, logged on. He downloaded all that lead information that the business was paying six figures for, and then he logged out. So the new company, the subject, had all this lead information without any overhead expense, was able to cut prices as a result, and was able to take a tremendous amount of business away from the victim. Pretty clear cut, you would say. So what happened? There was no prosecution in this case. And the reason is the victim company had no policies. Who's to say you're not allowed to download that information and take it? It makes sense to you and I that that's wrong, but in the law, it's very clear. You have to be able to show criminal intent. You need to have some policies in place to keep your company safe. In this case, because they could not show criminal intent, victim company wound up going bankrupt because of not only the financial loss, but the loss of business suddenly as well. So how are you going to protect yourself? I'm going to make all this available after the presentation today, but just really quick, encrypting your devices and having strong passwords, two-factor authentication. And think about it. In your banking today, do you use two-factor authentication? You should have it in place. If your bank does not offer two-factor authentication, get a different bank. It is the only way to truly keep your account information and your money secure. Antivirus software in place, keeping your systems up to date, which I mentioned, using secure Wi-Fi, not hotspots, not having your Wi-Fi name something that a thief can identify and target, backing up your data, and something I call boutique monitoring. Who's watching your personal identity? Who's watching your system? You have insurance. Well, think about it. Are you using items that you need to insure as much as your personal information's out there? There are companies out there, and I'm not one of them, so I'm not selling anything, but I can refer you to various places that will actually specifically monitor you, not just your credit history, but they will look at all your systems automatically using AI, artificial intelligence, to make sure you are up to date and everything is running. And whenever there's a problem, they'll jump in and fix it. You may think, well, I've got a cyber company now who's taking care of my computer network. They're managing it and making sure it's running. I guarantee you, they are not hired to check for problems. And I would make an inquiry of the people you're doing business with. Are they looking for malware? Are they running tests? If they're not, it's very short dollars. I'm talking hundreds of dollars annually to make sure you have something like that in place to keep yourself safe. And then finally, training. You have to train your employees. The work from home force needs training, and it's critical that they have it. The reason being is employees aren't thinking about security. They're thinking about doing business, especially in a time where they're worried about being laid off. Cyber criminals know this, and they are targeting your employees, and specifically, they're designing attacks that align with working remotely. So before, I might try to hack into the network. Now I'm going to try to hack into the Zoom call of your employee. That way I can garner information, disrupt business, steal personal information. Thinking about recovery, it's going to happen. If you have some sort of cyber attack, you might carry cyber insurance. And cyber insurance can certainly help you when you've been a victim, but you need to look at the policy carefully because there's a lot of exemptions and exclusions in cyber policies. For example, if someone hacks into your system and victimizes a lot of different customers you have, are they going to cover you if you were responsible for the hack? If you didn't have the latest patches downloaded, if you didn't have the proper security in place, if somebody violated password rules, etc. All those things can negate your insurance. So having insurance is not the cure-all to everything. It's better that you try to avoid the hack than hope that somebody will make you whole afterwards. If you've been hacked, you need to determine the scope of the hack. Make sure you know how far it extends. It's bad enough they got into your computers. Are they in all your employees' and customers' computers as well? Bring somebody in who does this work and can determine who it is. You need to inform everybody. I've dealt with a lot of clients who said, well, you know what, nobody really knows. We want to keep it quiet. You are going to have bigger problems if you don't tell people what happened. You need to make sure all the stakeholders know so they can fix the problem as well. There is actually 50 different state laws involving recovery. So if you've got a dealership in New Jersey and somebody from Connecticut or New York happens to buy a car from you, you've got to comply not only with Jersey laws, but their state laws as well. There's actually companies that do all this. It's good to know who they are and who you might need for when a breach happens rather than trying to find somebody on the internet then. Again, I have no affiliation with such companies, but I know a lot of them. I'm happy to share that information. And it's good to have the number just in case. So if something does happen, you can give them a call. The reality of these breaches, it's not a matter of if, it's when. You are going to be targeted in one way or another at some point of your career. For some of you out there today, you probably already have and just don't know it yet. So it's not a question of if or when, but how are you going to respond? What are you going to do to keep yourself safe, make your company, your employees, and your customers whole? With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Judy, but let me part by saying this. I speak for a living. I don't have any other services to sell. This is probably a terrible business model, but part of my speaking is you have my information. You ever have a problem, free of charge, you can give me a call and I will talk you through the problem, point you in the right direction, be able to connect you with other people that do specific services. No charge for any of that. You call me. My goal here is to help you get back to the way things should be. So I encourage you, don't hesitate to reach out and let's see if we can fix your problem. With that said, let me throw it back to Judy so we can hear the second half of our presentation today. Judy?
Thank you so much, John. That was great. Okay, so we're very excited now. We also have Dr. Suzanne Miller, and John is going to stay around for our presentation for questions at the end. So if you're typing your questions into Brian, we will address them all at the end. But at this point, I want to introduce Dr. Suzanne Miller. Dr. Miller is a principal with Citrin Cooperman. She's an active member of the cybersecurity practice within technology and risk advisory consulting. She has 25 years of experience in information security and regulatory compliance, helping clients align their IT governance, risk management, and compliance activities, specifically in identifying and mitigating controls for regulatory compliance. So her experience is extensive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Suzanne Miller.
Well, hello, everyone. And John, thank you so much for enlightening us on what the current state of cybersecurity is. I'm focused on today the dealership risks that have come to the forefront due to the pandemic. And as we start out here, I have a short period of time to cover a topic that could take weeks because of what's been going on in the world today. But what I want to cover for you is that I want to make you aware of what the new norm is for dealerships. And we need to rethink the mindset and how we approach privacy and security during this epidemic. And then we need to take a look at some of the top risks that are affecting your dealerships during this particular time. And then, of course, finally, we're going to wrap up with how we can reduce these types of risks that are out there. So let's start with the new norm. Who ever thought in December, while you're sitting around the Christmas tree, you would know the definition of social distancing? Well, today it's on everyone's lips. It has truly changed how your employees are going to react going forward to your customers as well as other employees. It's also changed how people are reacting in their neighborhoods, where they shop, where they go to their place of worship. And what we're going to see is that not only did that occur, but people try to figure out how to work in a social distancing. So dealerships actually started to develop a unique solution to try to stay in touch using social distancing by not being there at all. And they're trying to sell cars online, and interactive web-based tools have come to the forefront. It's important to note, as you all know, that during the lockdown, the government did allow dealerships to continue selling cars online and even deliver those cars so long as they followed the particular guidance. But social distancing is going to be a term that's going to go forward with us, and we're going to talk a little later about opening up again. The new norm is also telework. It has become very common for dealerships, especially when they're trying to keep their operations going, but yet they can't be open for business. And so dealerships move their staff to work remotely. And if you take a look at the chart that I've given you, 67% of employees, and this was a survey that was conducted by a law firm, 67% of employers for the first time were sending their employees home to work from home. And so remote workers, they had no idea of what that meant. Not only were they there for the first time, but they could not have imagined the impact that it was going to have on their daily habits, on their family. Everyone's routine was just thrown up in the air. The other norm that we're seeing is everything's cleaner and everything's safer. Once we get back in, as you know, we're opening up America again right now. And so as we open America, the workers going back to work, they may have staggered shifts. Remember social distancing? We also may see that they're going to have their temperatures checked before they can walk in the door. That's already happening. So at your dealership, you need to realize you have to be prepared for bringing people back, and schedules are going to change. Your repair shop schedules are going to change. And people, how are you going to handle taking the temperatures, and how are you going to handle turning people away? You also are probably going to have to address that with your customers, taking their temperature as well. So you've got a little bit of addressing issues you've never had to do before. And also you're going to start to see top to bottom disinfecting of workspaces. The customer lounges that you have, you're going to have to take a look at that and make some decisions. Who's going to handle the clicker? How is the clicker going to be sanitized? Are you going to have toys there for your customers? If you're going to have toys there, how are you going to handle customer social distancing with children running around? So there's a lot of things that are going to come to the forefront that you're going to have to address that you've never addressed before in this new norm. OSHA is working right now on bringing new types of regulations out for businesses as they open up. So you're going to have some help in this, because OSHA is going to dictate how you're going to move forward with opening up America. Well, sending people home, take a look at what we did, and we need to rethink our mindset as to how we did that. I mean, it just happened, and people were thrown into working from home, and businesses who'd never dealt with people working from home, it really was a perspective from the business side and from the worker side that just wasn't addressed. So the approach to privacy and security during that time was not even addressed. I will just say that. So the question becomes, what were we thinking when we did this? We sent these people home and we had them connect to their home internet service providers. We didn't ask, oh, are those routers and firewalls locked down? What about your printers? Are they connected? Oh, by the way, do you have Alexa? Do you have a Ring on your door that you didn't lock down in your firewall at home? And then you've got family members, because where are you working? You have family members that are listening to your conversations, and you may be talking to someone about buying a car, and you are repeating what they're saying. I'm sorry, what was that again? Your social security number is what? They also are having family members sharing while they're working with different organizations. So you have the computer in your home that you may have brought, or it's already there, and you might start sharing it with other people. So we're starting to see that we did nothing to think about these particular issues. Not only do we do nothing to think about those issues, guess what? We didn't even give them guidance. We didn't tell them how to make sure that to work from home, these devices need to be secure, and they need to be secure from other devices you may have in your home. And they also need to be physically secure as well as electronically secure. We didn't tell them or show them how to set their home networks up, that the work and the personal devices could be separated in that same network. We also didn't even address how to conduct private conversations where we're sharing sensitive information either on webinars or on phone calls. So what we did was we didn't even take into consideration anything that had to do with compliance. And as we all know, privacy and security compliance are very at dealerships. So when we talk about the new norm, there's lots and lots of risks that came into play. But due to time constraints here, we're only going to talk about the top 3. So when we talk about the top 3, the number 1 is hackers can manipulate VPNs. So businesses are thinking today, VPNs, wow, that's the new lifeline for business. I put a VPN in, everybody's secure. I'm going to send everybody home, all 100 of them, I'm going to put on a VPN. We are good to go. Once again, we failed because many home networks are already infected with malware and they have compromised hardware. We didn't even look at that. So when those machines are logged into the VPN, they can actually allow hackers to piggyback through the VPN into your dealership and to your network and stage attacks. Second top risk that's going on this new norm, attackers are taking advantage of human weaknesses. We're all concerned, we're all scared, we're all looking at TV, we're all trying to figure out what's going on in the world, how many viruses were exposed in our particular area this last week. We're all just looking for information as much as possible. So hackers have been out there developing malicious apps. And that means they are developing applications that look legitimate. They look like they came from the World Health Organization. Or as John just showed you, they look like they come from the federal government. But once you click, it installs that malware and it can steal your sensitive data. And realize that you send everybody home and you're trying to get them to learn how to do the VPN, how to do this, how to do that. Human nature has our workers, when they don't understand anything, they just pick up their mobile phone. And then from their mobile phone, they start doing stuff. Well, if you've made it possible for them to log in through the VPN, once again, these mobile devices may be compromised as well. But you didn't take a look at them to make sure that you were allowing them to get emails or other types of information without verifying that they are secure from their particular side. The last of the top 3 risks in this new norm are that employees took their work computer or they use their home computers in a physical space that just isn't like what they were used to at their work. It's not as secure and it's not as private as it was in the dealership. So between these people working from home with their firewalls that they have that may have just come out of the box and been plugged in, or their routers, or their printers that are on their own internet, they've got tablets on there, they've got game consoles, and then also you've got that home automation. Once again, that's the Ring, that's your refrigerator telling you that you need to buy milk. All of that is connected to your workers' home network, and it makes the computer doing the work for your dealership to be at risk of being compromised by hackers. And once again, additionally, taking those conference calls that are within earshot of a family member or even an employee, could be their spouse, could be their friend next door, that they're employees of other companies. You're compromising the privacy of sensitive information by them being able to hear what is going on your telephone calls. So those are the top 3 risks. Once again, there's a whole lot more, but let's look at reducing those risks. It's real important for you to understand that dealerships, no matter what's going on in the world, you're still required by law to protect internet connected systems, including hardware, software, and data from cyber attack. And you say, well, you know, what laws? Well, you know the laws. From a security perspective, here's your old friend, GLBA, the safeguard rule that came out. It's now been updated to include all the things you need to do for cyber. And the FTC has even given you cybersecurity guidelines for that. Remember, PCI, payment card industry, and 50 state breach notification laws, as John was telling you about. Because you are a financial institution, you have to comply with the New York Department of Financial Services. That went into effect, I think, 1.5 years ago. From the privacy perspective, well, this one's growing. We have the what's known as the GDPR, which is the European Union. They brought in huge privacy laws into the United States. How they're going to prosecute, that's a whole other story. But now we have California, January 1, 2020, that went into effect. And that's Privacy Act for Californians. New York, don't you love this name? New York came up with the SHIELD Act, which stands for Stop Hacks and Improve Data Security Act. You're in New Jersey, but this covers anyone from the state of New York, what you have to do to protect that data, even if you don't have a business in New York. You have it in New Jersey. When did that go into effect? March 21st, 2020. A lot of people missed that because they were busy trying to figure out how they could get a mask and protect themselves and their family. New Jersey just proposed a privacy law in March of this year. We'll see what happens with that. But once again, you cannot stop being compliant because, as John spoke, the cost of a breach, you need to look at the cost that the state attorney generals are going to come after you for. So that number goes up and up and up and up and up. So having a breach can be extremely devastating from a financial perspective. So I am going to give you a roadmap. It's a very simple roadmap for you to reduce these risks. And because I am, as they say, the queen of compliance, this also is going to help you go forth and maintain or become compliant. Compliance is not an event, it's an ongoing process over and over again. So let's look at the first step in our three-step roadmap. When we talk about having a breach, what are we talking about? We're talking about data. All they want is data. So the most important thing you have to do is know where your sensitive data is. Know what needs to be protected. Because doing all these things, installing this, doing that, at the end of the day, if you don't have sensitive data on those systems, you're just spending your money to protect something that doesn't exist. So the first thing is discover and document all the physical and electronic locations of your dealership sensitive data. When I say physical locations, if you have it in the cloud, you need to know what cloud. Where is that cloud? And if you have it in your office, you need to know where it is. If you have a dealership and you have all of your data aggregate back to one server, you need to know where that is. So you need to be able to know physically and electronic locations of all your sensitive data. And that discovery is not easy. You're going to find that you've got stuff all over the place. Employee and HR data, customer and prospect data, company data. It could be your financial and your board meetings and your legal matters. Where is the sensitive data of your company? Once you discover it, document it, because this is a work in process. Now you're going to take a look at it and you're going to determine what data can be removed from being on an internet location. Can it be deleted? Can it be moved off such that from the internet no one can access it? But you need to determine if you can reduce the scope of all the places you have sensitive data. And you don't forget to take a look at the paper too, because you can further reduce your risk. That paper has to be protected as well. Then you've now reduced the scope of your sensitive data. Hopefully you've tried to figure out a way to put things all together such that you're not trying to protect 35 servers, 4,000 workstations. You actually have reduced the scope of that you have to protect. Now let's put a policy in place. So let's get a data protection plan that has data classification. Is it highly sensitive? Is it somewhat sensitive, or if it's not sensitive at all? What is the retention of that data? Because you don't want to have 40 years of data sitting somewhere. You've got to clean out, just like you clean out your house. What's the retention of that data? And that retention could be controlled by your state laws. You may have to keep some data for a long period of time. The same thing's true of data locations. Once again, define the classification of the data. What's the retention of it? Where is it? Because once the retention period has expired, you've got to remove it. And your policies and procedures will help you with that. And then you have to monitor that data. monitor it to make sure that it has not been compromised. And when you monitor that data, you need to make sure that you are monitoring based upon the regulations, because your regulations tell you how this data needs to be monitored. And then finally, on this very first corralling your sensitive data, never allow unencrypted sensitive data to reside on a system, on a workstation, on a laptop, on a tablet, or on cell phones. That's the first step. What is it that you are trying to protect? And it is the sensitive data, and let's reduce the scope of that sensitive data and know where it is. Step two, now you've got your sensitive data, you've got the scope of it all reduced down a little bit here. Now, you need to know if that data is protected. Is it secure and is it private? And the only way you can do that is by performing, and we start with a high level risk assessment. You do a high level risk assessment of your dealership. And that high level is going to let you know where you have weak processes or insecure areas that are at risk of a breach. What's a weak process? Well, a weak process is, right now, you may have a weak process. You've got salespeople online gathering information and their VPN isn't working, so they're going to store it on their own home computer. You need to know that they've implemented that process themselves. So there's lots of areas you need to discover in this risk assessment. Once you've done the risk assessment, then based upon that, prioritize what is a high risk, medium risk, and a low risk. And those high risks, address those first, because those are the ones that have a higher risk of the threat of a breach happening. Do those first and then work through them. You need to appoint a security official or hire a virtual chief security officer. GLBA, safeguard rule, told you way back when you have to have an information security officer. Today, that person's called a chief information security officer. So that person is the one who's to implement and to oversee the cybersecurity program, or better yet, the program to help you comply with all of the regulations that will put security and privacy around the sensitive data that needs to be protected. And then finally, you need to implement a vulnerability management. So in order to identify what's wrong and in order to fix what's wrong, then you need to have a vulnerability management program that's going to go in like a hacker, and it's going to run scans on your systems from the inside and from the outside. And it's going to tell you where you have holes and what you need to do to fix those holes. Maybe you have a website out there that you ask people to put their information in. They'll find out that that website probably has something that was coded wrong, that there's a flaw in the code that makes it possible for them to go straight from that into your network in your dealership. Penetration testing. That is truly an ethical hacker trying to get to specific information, and they will pound on your system to try to see if they can get in. And then finally, vulnerability management, phishing security tests, running tests on your employees to act like what John showed you, a scam, and see who clicks through. And unfortunately, you'll find out that maybe on the front end that you have 60% of your employees clicking through. That's an accident waiting to happen. All right, so when you take a look at the vulnerability management, those are the items that you need to do periodically, such that once you have remediated, that's going to help you to determine if you still have issues. So let me get back. Sorry, my hand hit the wrong thing. So let me get back and show you. Hold on, let me get there. So when we take a look at the last step that you're going to need to do, and if you've ever been in one of my presentations, I can't emphasize enough that the key to success is education. And your weakest link is your unskilled, untrained employee. Doing those phishing exercises is going to help you understand your employees' lack of understanding or how well you've done to educate your employees such that they won't become a victim to any type of cyber simulation. It's important for your staff to also feel that they're a part of the security of your dealership. And that means ask them to help you. Ask them to help bring examples of scams that they've seen or that's happened to them. The more you can share real life experiences with your staff, the more they're going to understand how they could be a part of a scam, and they'll learn to look at things, and it's going to help reduce your threats coming into your organization. And of course, it's at the airports, it's everywhere, but it's so true. You need to encourage your employees to let you know if something's going on. If you see something, say something. It may not amount to anything, but you need to really encourage, if you see something going on that's going to affect the security or the privacy of our sensitive information, you have an open door policy for them to come in. All right. Well, I want to thank you for participating in the webinar today, and I want to pass this back so we can have a question session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
I'm going to be passing
Suzanne.
it back to Brian. Brian, you have some questions?
Actually, I wanted to see if you or Charles had any for Special Agent Iannarelli or Dr. Miller. Gives our attendees a chance to submit their questions.
Okay, so I'll start with one, Suzanne, because I go back to the GLB on the original level, which was a lot of paper. And I found it interesting in your presentation, you talked about it almost going back to paper. So we always talk about going from paper to electronic, and now we're talking going back maybe from electronic to paper. So could you fill everybody in? And from what I remember, the GLB required quarterly vulnerability scans, and what the fine is with the GLB, and then what you would recommend that they do for ongoing training.
All right, so the GLBA is governed by the FTC, and what we have seen with breaches is that the FTC makes their own decision as to what the fine is going to be. And so if you are really negligent, they can come after you with a hammer. Now, if you take a look at the FTC guidelines that are out there, and if you look at the GLBA, GLBA is not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just says administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. It doesn't tell you what to do, but they've given you this guideline, and I have seen them go after dealerships, restaurants, multiple organizations because they are not doing vulnerability management. If you are not running internal and external scans or a pen test, they're going to fine you for that. If you do not have what they call a WISP, Written Information Security Program, in place, then they're going to fine you for that as well. Some people have changed the name, but it's still the same, to a written cybersecurity program. Cybersecurity is a subset of security. It's not another venue. It's a subset of security. And you also have to have a information security expert that manages it. It can be called a cybersecurity officer. It can be called a information security officer. It can be called a chief information security officer, a designated person, and they don't have to be in-house. You can hire those out-house. So if you have not looked at that notebook on your shelf for GLBA safeguard rule in years, you need to pull it out and you need to update it. And I advise you to go to the FTC website. They will tell you what you need to put in it now. And if you look at what they're asking you to do, it follows along the same line of PCI. It's pretty much the same thing. And if you look at the New York, if you look at the Shield, it's the same thing. So if you truly want to have a program in place that you meet all these requirements, then take the most prescriptive one and implement it. And I can almost guarantee you that every one of those things you put in place also makes you compliant with all those other requirements that are out there.
Great, thank you.
Charles, do you have any questions you want to ask? We've got, I'm surprised we don't have more questions coming in. So either you guys covered the information really, really well, or the dealers are all set. But Charles, do you have anything that you want to ask either of the presenters?
Yeah, I was wondering, where can a dealership find vulnerability management resources? Like if they want to do a penetration test or take some of the other steps that you had mentioned, where would are there companies out there that'll come in and do that, or how do they go about doing that?
First of all, just as a disclaimer, Citrin Cooperman does have a vulnerability management side, but there are multiple companies that have them. My suggestion is you be very careful. You want to make sure that the company that you hire is not, or the people you hire. It can't be your next door neighbor's son. He's really good at this. You need to hire someone who is a reputable company and that has been around a while doing these. That's the most important thing, because think about what they're doing. They're trying to hack into your system, and if they don't know how to do it the right way, they could bring your whole system down. All right, and if you go out there and you look for vulnerability management, you'll start to see some names that you recognize. And once again, if you recognize those names, IBM, for example, everybody would recognize that name. And if you take a look at whoever your CPA is, you'll find out that they might also have this particular division. But let me make this clear. When we talk about the fact that you need to have a risk assessment, we talk about the fact you need to have vulnerability management. I advise you, do not have your IT people or your IT vendor do the assessment or do the vulnerability. Why? Because it's fox in a hen house. Your vendor, IT vendor, said he's or she has put everything in place. Why would you want them to assess whether everything's in place from a security and privacy standpoint and then tell you? No, you need to have someone who is not your IT person doing the vulnerability management as well as doing the risk assessments.
Thank you. That's a great point, and I think that's what I was really trying to get at. So you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We do have one specific question here. Does storing temperature check data fall under HIPAA?
Okay, so HIPAA is a law, and the covered entities, meaning the people who have to comply with HIPAA, are your data banks, they are your physicians, and they are what's known as a health plan, if you have a self-insured health plan. And then the third one is a service provider to either of the three above. None of those are car dealerships. So there is no HIPAA involved with taking someone's temperature. Now, the question would flip over to, is it PII? And that's a whole nother issue, all right? And realize that the government is coming out, has proposed a COVID law about protecting information that was exposed during COVID. And that is so broad, very broad. But once again, it is not covered underneath HIPAA, but I would definitely be very cautious about sharing information. I would hate to see on the news that the mayor came in to buy a car and here's a picture of him being turned away because he has a temperature.
Good point. Well, as I said, I'm surprised we didn't get more questions here. Did Judy or Charles, do you have anything else? Or, I mean, we're about 10 after 12 now, I guess. Is there anything else you wanted to ask other presenters?
No, I really want to thank though John and FBI John and Dr. Miller for joining us today. I think the information was incredibly helpful. I hope our participants found it that way as well. Certainly, you can email either one of them if you have direct questions. I know this stuff is sometimes not only Greek to us, but it's Greek to the dealerships as well, because a lot of them don't really have IT departments to handle all this. So I appreciate your time. I think it was very helpful. Brian, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to cover, but I think I'd like to thank these guys for their time again.
I'd like to thank both Special Agent Iannarelli and Dr. Miller, and just let everybody know that we will be posting a recording of this webinar and their slides once I get them. We'll be posting them to our website this afternoon. So thank you again to everyone, and that concludes our webinar. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.